as part of a small line of pieces we're doing that are kind of pin-up-y type shots where they're a little bit rougher and simpler with just a portrait of a figure, no background. I want to do something to complement the piece I did earlier with Wonder Woman, and Starfire is another favorite of mine from DC, and in particular the way she was designed by George Perez, the way she appeared for, I want to say, the first 20 years of her existence before she was changed by a cartoon version that kind of took away a lot of the alluring qualities to her that were in her initial DNA. So there's a very distinctive face, hairstyle, and vibe from her when she was first created in 1980, and I wanted to connect with that.
Our report details how advertising through television transforms strangers to your product into acquaintances, and acquaintances into friends, and friends into customers. You could almost say, as a result, that television puts into every living room a selling machine.
Welcome back, everybody. It's the full house. It's a noisy full house, but that's all right. It's Kinescope. John Suntress here. Gabe Hardman here. And look, the prodigal sons are back, everybody.
Yeah.
Ian Brill, William Meyer.
Hi.
Great to see everybody, and not surprised because this is going to be a really exciting subject to talk about. 1984, the Studio One production starring Eddie Albert and Lorne Green.
Hey, look, I manage to pick the grimmest, the most unpleasant and and saddest and grim episode of anything so far? I kind of think so. I don't know.
So. That's all right, man. No, this is great. And truly, there are still other interesting sci-fi things that aren't as obvious as before that I hope we will explore in future episodes.
Yeah, well, I think this is less about science fiction than it is about, it's not, as it goes out of its way of stating, it goes out of its way to say at the beginning, like, it's not about spaceships. It's not about, it's not men in space. It's, it's like, it's a satire. It's essentially like a grim satire.
Yeah.
And, which I would imagine everybody knows because presumably they went to high school and they read 1984. I didn't read it in high school, but I read it a little later. But,
yeah, I didn't either. But yeah, and it was, and the movie, the John Hurt, Richard Burton movie, came out in the midst of my college years.
Right. And I rewatched that for this. We could talk about that. We could talk about a whole bunch of different adaptations of this.
100%.
But we're starting off with the Studio One version from the beginning of the 6th season. Starring Eddie Albert, and it's and Lorne Green. Yeah,
that's a fantastic image.
And this is the first TV adaptation or the first dramatic,
Well, yes, the first
on-screen adaptation.
Yes.
Yeah, there was a radio adaptation earlier.
Yeah, David Niven did it in the 50s and
1949. Yeah.
Oh, pardon me, 49, and NBC University of the Air, a very prestigious anthology audio show. And then, as you pointed out, and I had never heard it, but now did, the BBC audio version from the 60s with the second Doctor Who, Patrick Troughton.
Yeah, my favorite Doctor. My
cool.
favorite Doctor, rather, whatever.
Sure.
The 49 radio version, that's the that's the year it came out. That's
right.
Absolutely. And then and then of course David Bowie's adaptation. His near concept album of Diamond Dogs. We Are the Dead. Watching I watched all of these. All sorts of different versions of this. So much this week that I'm hopefully I can tell the difference between them. But
I was going to say, are you depressed? Are you going to be okay?
No, look, consider the general tone of things. This is a little bit, this lifted me up a little bit. Just as far as this episode is concerned, this live TV Studio One version of it, let's go around the horn and find out what people thought. Ian Bro.
Well, I may have done myself a disservice by watching the Peter Cushing version before the Eddie Albert version.
Mm-hmm.
Which one, the Peter Cushing, which was written by Nigel Neal, it was done for the BBC. That's 2 hours long.
Yeah.
This is like most Studio One episodes, is an hour long, and you can feel them really rush through it. And I do think the appeal of 1984 is the world building, because I do feel that the characters are kind of not very well drawn, shall we say?
Yeah, they're there to make a point. They're made rather than to be fully developed characters.
And you can the 2 hour pace, I think, really helps. Whereas this, you just in the hour long pace, unfortunately, that the kind of stunted characterization, it really comes through. But I do want to say Lorne Green, I should say Andre Morel plays O'Brien in the BBC version. He's great. Side note, Peter Cushing and Andre Morel in a great movie called Cash on Demand, which was a non-horror Hammer movie. Check that out.
Yeah, I like that movie. Yeah.
They are great in that movie. They are great together in this. But Lorne Green, those eyebrows are doing more acting than anybody else in this whole thing.
Yeah. And look, he's sporting some crazy hair as well. I don't know what's happening. You can't really see it as well in that photo, but like, yes, here we go. This is whatever is happening here. This is it's something. But I mean, I agree about the Lorne Green of it all, and just the BBC version that Ian's talking about is it was just from a year later. It's right. It's from '54. Of course, there's a great performance in it because Peter Cushing stars in it, and he's the greatest actor who ever lived.
Right.
But also Donald Pleasance is in it, and Donald Pleasance weirdly
he's perfect for it.
Yeah, and he plays the same. There's also a 1956 version that's a British-made film, but with Edmund O'Brien and Jan Sterling. That he's in it again. He plays the same character in that, and then later he's also in THX 1138, right? Which is basically just the same story again, and he's kind of playing a similar character. But it's like he was made for this. William, what are your thoughts on the Studio One version?
I really love the Studio One version, and having seen Peter Cushing's version so close together, it's hard, like Ian, not to bounce back and forth. But I found Eddie Albert to play the character as an everyman, whereas to me Peter Cushing was a little bit removed. So I felt like
one's American and one's British. Like the American one is the everyman, the British one is like, let's keep our.
Well, I felt like Peter Cushing was already beaten by the time the story started, and in the Eddie Albert version, the relationship was just earthier. The romance to me leaned a little bit into melodrama, which I actually appreciate with the music and the camera moves and the way. I felt the Peter Cushing one had a stronger atmosphere of paranoia, but. I really liked Eddie Albert's approach to the I don't know. I just felt like he was a man who was falling through the situation, and I could therefore feel his turn at the end. The knife was a little bit sharper for me because I felt he was just a normal Joe.
I do think that he brings a level of kind of humanity to it that other people don't. I mean, like he's bringing something a little. I think that. He's doing a little bit of work to fill in some of the stuff that we're not getting through the script. Agreed.
Yes.
But I don't necessarily think that that's a positive for telling this story. I mean, it's a weird. Everything about this story is a weird dynamic in some way. But Jeff, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I watched it in the proper order of seeing the Eddie Albert one first, and then the Peter Cushing one. And it's funny because the Cushing one being longer and and having more to work with connects the dots more for you. So the Eddie Albert one feels more like science fiction because it's going really fast. They're already using the terms and everything. Eddie brings a lot of energy to it. I was really impressed actually with him. Like he seems, well, he always gets the rap of being older than he ever was until the end when he was, old for 50 years. But he gets that youthful thing going. He and Julia essentially immediately see each other and start groping each other because they're like, we got no time. They only don't look at you for 10 seconds here, and it's like, in a way, it kind of sells the weird fascist state. But the Peter Cushing one, obviously, has painfully enjoyable stuff like those evil kids. And,
oh my God, yeah.
I just want to kill those kids. And, and that part, something, well, that's kind of thing they did, like even in, they've done it in everything where there's Hitler Youth and stuff, or like in Jojo Rabbit, when the kids are being indoctrinated and they're telling on their parents and things like that, and
right
when stuff like that comes in, it gets to the dose of it where it suddenly seems real, kind of hits and hurts a little more.
Yeah.
Whereas enjoyable to see Donald Pleasance going newspeak, like like he's this visiting college professor who's sitting there to wow you with his ideas and hopefully get on staff. But
I mean,
he does that manic thing so well.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest distinctions between the Studio One version and the BBC version is just kind of dropping a huge part of the all the newspeak and the and just the idea about language being something that could be simplified in order to manipulate people, that could be and all that sort of stuff. I have mixed feelings about that concept generally. I mean, I think that that it's used in the book and in as an idea. It's it plays into a kind. I mean, look, there's a lot about the story that plays into a kind of conservatism about stuff, and but it, like, the particular idea of that somehow language shifting is inherently bad is which is one way you could take it. I don't think that's not right. That's a language always shifts, and a kind of reactionary point of view is that somehow we're losing things by the the culture and the language shifting as it goes along.
But isn't that though the point of view of the fascist state, who is saying by returning to an earlier form of our language, we're regressing and simplifying the verbiage?
Yeah.
So I don't think the book is.
I'm just saying.
That.
I don't know. I'm just saying that I think there are elements of the book that are not. Like it's that, but it's also. It's not worth going into a big debate about 1984 for like a high school debate about it, I guess. But it's also that the point of view of Winston Smith, the main character, and the apparent protagonist in it is so much about returning to the past, and about that the past is someplace that that's better and more positive, and that is a dubious idea as well. So I think that these things play against each other in a confusing way is kind of the point.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Gabe, because I think this was a big problem I had with the Studio One. This is going to sound weird, maybe. It was just weird to see 1984 with American characters, because I think so much of the story is about Orwell saying, like, looking at the British character, which is something he always wrote about, and how something like a Soviet-style state could arise from this certain aspects of the British character of the past, of this anti-sex
aspect. And the post-World War II status quo that Britain suffered really well into the 60s.
Right, and and that they've lost the empire.
No, I agree. Good point, Ian. Absolutely. What I honestly, not the gay bass, but what my favorite part of this really was.
I was getting to you, John.
Yeah.
I trust me.
Anyway.
John Huntress, what did you think of 1984?
What I really liked is truly the use of levels and stairs and all this stuff. And I mean, here, where's that sad group? The sad shot of Eddie Albert at the end, just kind of off in his own little world. I guess I didn't pull that one as I thought I had. But really, I love that. I also love the room 101 and everything.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, I mean, I just really, again, being stuck in a studio and everything, and coming up with imaginative ways of angles and levels.
I agree too. I mean, I think that the strength of it is the visual style of the sets and that visual of of Big Brother, the kind of 50s stylized painting of Big Brother. I have it someplace who painted that, but.
I was going to say the art direction here, if you compare the Studio One version to the Cushing one, I love the Studio One dopey Big Brother.
Yes.
And you have.
It looks like the King Crimson album cover.
I know. I actually went out of my way to look up and see if it was somehow the same artist as the Court of the Crimson King
That's
cover.
awesome. Yeah. I forgot about that. That's fantastic. Boy.
Yeah, the Cushing one gives you the Stalin Big Brother.
Right.
And they go for the weird, sweet pucker lips Big Brother.
Yeah, pucker lips. I like that.
Well, I also, on that same idea, contrasting the representations of the screen technology, where in the Studio One version, we had this really kind of smoky, glassy mirror type effect, which was kind of cool. And then in the Cushing one, you kind of had that oval with the rotating illumination, which was like, a different technological approach to it.
Yeah, I and it's also, like such a core part of this is about television, right? And so like, the idea that this is a television adaptation is, appropriate. It seems like it's making a comment in and of itself.
Well, and also the way that real British society went into closed circuit TV and monitoring the streets in the Thatcher era. I mean, that's the thing is, again, how prescient Orwell was, and everybody was really paying attention to that as it was actually happening. Right. And it's like, hey, what are you doing? Hence, Alan Moore and V for Vendetta and the like. Yeah,
I mean, I think that I do really like the style of the of the American one. I do in a way I kind of think it works on its own terms if you don't think about the book too much, right? Agreed. And but obviously that's tough. I mean, the BBC one is so cheap and so literally cardboardy sort of doors and stuff, and it's made in a much more rudimentary way that's not thinking about the visuals and everything to the degree that the American ones was. So I mean, they do have different properties than.
But I wonder, given that it was a time when the book came out, that society in general was much better read than we are currently. I wonder how many people saw this, maybe also read the book, whatever, and if they were disappointed by the Studio One version, or again, given that it's a mass medium, then maybe this is the way that people first were introduced to the story. And again, this is the 3-channel era when they had I'm sure they had at least 20 or 30 million people watching it.
Yeah, it's fun to think of the honeymooners getting that TV that they rent for $1 a week, and then they see the Studio One.
What the hell is this?
84.
Oh, it makes perfect sense to me, Ralph.
Well, that's the crazy thing about this is, compared to the BBC version and most other versions, is if you watch the Studio One version on YouTube, they have the Westinghouse ads in here, and there's something just weird about the Westinghouse ads in this, especially in a story about
I love
mass
that
media propaganda.
Right.
The
embracing of technology and everything versus
Furness comes across as Big Brother when she shows up.
Yes, she's
and they say the Westinghouse, like
she's big sister.
Self-frosting, yeah.
Exactly.
I like the Studio One's approach to the song, the chestnut tree, and I sell you and you sell me, and then at the end you have him walking away from the camera and the song, and you can feel the studio space, I think, in the way they do that, where you can hear the song kind of reverbing, and I really like that.
I agree.
Yeah, I do think that there are really good production elements of the Studio One version, and I like Eddie Albert in it, and I like Lorne Green in it, and I just don't. I mean, it's not necessarily achieving the thing that the story is out to achieve in some ways, I guess, but maybe it does just feel too slight to quite get there, but but I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of things that I liked about it, though.
Well, I thought the do you see four lights Cardassian moment was very effective in the Studio One version, where you just have the fingers, just like and there's no intermediary. In the Peter Cushing one, he's like locked in that coffin.
Yeah.
And I just like that you have his eyes and you have the fingers, and he's like, "Do you actually see five, or do you want me to think you see five?" And I just thought that whole interchange was chilling.
Yeah, and it's playing into what live TV does best, which is close-ups of people performing, making that kind of connection through, faces and, acting.
Do we think Indiana Jones's fear of rats is not unlike Winston Smith?
Yeah, because there's so much depth in Indiana Jones's
fear of rats.
Although I gotta say, if there's one thing about this, about every version of 1984, including
the rat thing,
that I
never
think
works.
is just fucking stupid. It's the rat thing. It's like it's like it's from a movie serial or something. It doesn't fit in with the bit. It's just that, like, okay, you had this neat idea about a cage that goes on your face. Yeah.
But other than that, it doesn't really work. It's
a lot of explaining about, no, look, these are really pissed off rats. This isn't just a rat who's going to hang out and, live in a cage on your head. He's going to eat your eyeballs out. I promise you. We're never going to see that, but it's going to happen.
Was I reading too much into it then? Because they kept talking about how Room 101 adapted to whatever the fear of the victim was. So I kind of had it in my mind that it was part of the brainwashing scenario that, okay, we know what you're afraid of, and here it is, but is it really happening?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, they were surveilling them the whole time that they were hiding out in the in the apartment together. So they heard his somewhat unconvincing rat story, and they used that against him.
Questioning if they're actually attaching rats to his face, or
if it's just a subjective thing. Well, and that's certainly brought up that you could certainly, the Studio One version is easy to read that way, because you don't see it. He just walks off into the darkness, and you hear rats yelling at him, and then he comes back out.
Julia, do it to Julia.
Yeah, but look, I'm going to give it credit, though, for being an American thing with Eddie Albert, which in the end is totally bleak and totally nihilistic. There isn't a happy ending slapped on it. He plays he ultimately, gives into his cowardice and sells her out. It's they who knows? Sometimes, so the 1956 version of the movie, did anybody watch this? But
no, the Edmund O'Brien one.
Yes, the Edmund O'Brien one. So it's terrible, right? Like, it's a bad movie. Like, it's was it
a Hammer? Was it a Hammer, that pre-horror Hammer?
I don't think it's Hammer. I mean, it's an English produced movie. You could look it up. I might be wrong.
Doing that while we're talking.
But it's it's of that era where Hammer movies would have, they bring in Forrest Tucker or somebody like that.
That's what I was wondering.
A somewhat washed up American,
Well, speaking of Nigel Neal, the Brian Dunleavy in the Quatermass movies.
Yes, Quatermass movies. Yeah, Nigel Neal hated Brian Dunleavy as Quatermass, and because he was just nothing like he imagined. But the the 50s one is, it takes so many of the things that that are paranoid and and disturbing, and the way that they their behaviors to deal with this sort of stuff and turn them into cheeseball Hollywood moments. I mean, there's a part where and particularly this falls into the 1984 from 1984, the Michael Radford movie, where things are so precious, like coffee and and white bread is a huge deal, and the in the 1956 version, they're just kind of hanging out in a kind of nicely furnished apartment, and at one point she comes over there, and it's very traditional. The love story-ish part of it is very traditional Hollywoody junk, and at one point she comes over and is like, "Hey, so should I put on some coffee?" And it's just they're not even living in a world where where the the ramifications
Scarcity
of this stuff make any sense.
It was Columbia that made the Edmund O'Brien film.
Okay, but I mean, it was British produced, but I guess yeah. I mean, it is, of all of these versions, it's the most compromised, and even that it doesn't have. They don't. I was so expecting it to have a happy ending. Like there's a notorious adaptation of Crime and Punishment from by. I think von Sternberg directed it. Peter Lorre is in it, I think, if I'm not wrong. And it's got a happy ending tacked onto it, right? Like it's and Brazil. So I thought, well, right, yeah. Brazil is another, 1984, just
Rachel
slightly,
and Deckard driving off, into the Shining footage, that kind of thing.
But I was surprised though that the 56 one didn't do that. I mean, it didn't give you a happy ending, except somehow they managed to I swear it basically ends with him joining in with the 2 minutes of hate or whatever, and in a sort of orgiastic way, and somehow the triumphant sounding music at the end of the 50s one almost made it sound like this was a good thing. Like I couldn't ever figure out what the hell they were trying to accomplish.
Poor Jan Sterling is always in these adaptations that opt for the happier ending, and obviously you're saying it didn't do that in this case, but that's like The Harder They Fall. The last Humphrey Bogart movie has a much more optimistic ending than the actual novel did. Yeah,
and look, Jan Sterling is not she's they barely try to make her look like she's a comrade over here, right? And she there's one point where he's going on about the his understanding of their work of how terrible Big Brother is and all of this stuff, and INSAC is and all that stuff. INSAC.
Conversely, though, I looked up Norma Crane's filmography. Didn't recognize her in Fiddler on the Roof as Goldie, but died reasonably young. I mean, I think she was only in her 40s.
Yeah, like in 73. I didn't find how she died, but
no, neither did I. But that's kind of a shame that really this and Fiddler on the Roof are really her big bright spots in her acting career.
Gabriel, you mentioned the 2 minutes of hate, and that reminded me, in the Studio One version we get a glimpse of Martin Landau, and I really like the fur. Everyone, there he is. Everyone is just so intense, and I tweeted about this earlier. I felt that there was a parallel between the bottled up sensuality of the man and the woman meeting in secret, and then in public sort of having the same kind of energy and fanaticism for the demagogue, the image of reaching forward, and plus you learn through the story that those two right there, they're basically faking it. And you just wonder how many of the associated, how many of them are true haters.
Sure.
Eddie Albert's really not trying to sell his 2 minutes. He's going, he does this a couple of times.
Look at him. He's committing face crime right there.
He is. We've always been at war with East Asia, and he doesn't get it.
Yeah, and I mean, I did think that talking about the hate part in the Studio One version, they changed the name of the dissident to Cassandra from Emmanuel Goldstein, right? and which is odd. I don't know if that's about. I mean, it seems like the book is pointing out the kind of anti-Semitic quality to to the the whole thing. I don't know were they worried about that and and felt like they need to change it. I don't know.
I thought maybe they were just trying to be a little more obvious with just simply using Cassandra.
Yes, because 1984 isn't obvious.
People got to think about Goldstein. Nothing.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. That's my optimistic take on it.
No, I agree. The radio versions were really as opposed to watching the film version. I listened to the Troughton thing and the David Niven one. They're excellent. They're really they're really effective. Very
The Troughton one is the one that I didn't get to. I did listen to the David Niven one. I thought it was pretty good. The only thing I didn't like about it is that it has that kind of you are walking down the street narration, where it's like it's talking at you and you're supposed to be Winston Smith and stuff. That's just a trope that I can't stand in anything. But it's generally well done. They could obviously get at more of the ideas and stuff because of being able to basically use a voiceover and
how long are those
narration.
The Troughton one is close to 2 hours. The other one is only an hour.
Yeah,
and the David Niven one.
But there's also some interesting, just contextually, it's 1949, and they have on a kind of another author whose name I don't have in front of me, but who gives a sort of commentary about the book and about what he thinks that the book is going to, and this is the year it came out in the U.S. So I mean, it's like, he's giving. He's talking about how he thinks it's going to last, but also making a huge point about it not being about a specific country, which it seems like the book, read the book a long time ago over the pandemic, because it's me, I read a book biography of Stalin. Right. So, to cheer myself up and so I listened to the audiobook of this while I was working this week too, of the novel, and the novel is just like, it's so one-to-one on the Stalinism in ways that I didn't even realize the first time that I read it. I mean, I thought about it in general terms, of course, but they're like the parallels are so specific in the novel. It's just really heavy-handed, not that, look, I'm not Team Stalin over here. I think that that Stalin is totalitarian. He betrayed the revolution. Is a monster.
I've seen your Vistaprint account. You are so Team Stalin, it hurts.
Yeah. So, but I mean, look, I'm not making it. I'm just saying, I'm not making any. No Stalin apologists.
Yeah, exactly.
Over here,
no, with you, man. No, it's hilarious. So that's very good. That's very. I mean, again, I didn't see. Apparently, Robert Culp also in the.
Well, he's only his voice. Yeah, he's the male voice on coming from the TV. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You are dead. Move to the center of the room. Do not touch each other.
Yes.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, as I think Ian was pointing out, our previous show series before this was the Outer Limits, and of all these things we've covered, so many actors who are who end up on the Outer Limits: Martin Landau, Robert Culp, Eddie Albert on a terrible one.
With the flying frogs.
Who else?
Donald Pleasance in the British version.
Well, that's
the man with the power.
And all of those same people straight to Colombo afterwards. So
goddamn right. Absolutely, man. Including Eddie Albert.
It's the dominoes.
That's the thing about Eddie Albert. We all love him as Mr. Douglas, and was an effective song and dance man, Oklahoma and the like and everything. Yeah. But when he's allowed to play an asshole, he's always a great Longest Yard. He's a great as the warrior.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, truly,
and more versatile, I think, actually, than people give him credit for. I think he's a good actor. Yeah,
it was interesting seeing Lorne Green because he for so many years of my childhood, he's Cartwright, and and it's all out there on Bonanza, but it's like this is kind of like what he would get back to late. He gets to his sci-fi roots, when he goes back to Battlestar Galactica.
Adama, absolutely.
Although he did like
that commanding voice, and I think Burton achieves the same thing in the John Hurt 1984 movie.
Yeah, he's good at it. Yeah, the 1984 is has a really good cast. It's I don't know if anybody go back and watch that, or
I did. Yeah,
I saw it
trying
back
to
in the
remember
day.
it.
Yeah. I knew I'd seen it in the past, but I barely remembered it, so I rewatched it for this.
This is the hottest love scene you'll ever see.
Yeah,
Hilarious.
it's the opposite. Yes, but although certainly there's 1,000% more nudity in that movie than there is in any other of these adaptations.
Yes.
But
not the audio ones. Sorry.
That's true. Well, fair point.
Theater of the mind.
Or maybe
Theater of the
Much
mind.
more perverse in my mind.
You know what? The whole book, though, really works really well in audio, except for the fact that then you don't get the visual of the telescreen.
Yeah.
And I think you need this thing in your home. His prediction at I forgot where. Is it in the Wikipedia or where they're talking about people when TVs first came out weren't sure if it could see them?
Mm.
They're like,
Oh yeah.
Is there a two-way deal going on here? And
Sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and now there kind of is.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. There definitely.
I
is.
certainly thought
In
that
my
as a
country,
child.
TV watches you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yakov. Yeah. Like that the 80s movie is my take it's very there's great actors in it. It's a very well mounted movie or whatever. Like it looks really good. It's shot by Roger Deakins, so it's superficially visual without being great storytelling. And it's I think they do a great job of like presenting that whole world, but it's also pretty one note and kind of it just doesn't ever quite feel like it takes off. It doesn't feel like it probably in a lot of ways Brazil, or at least some version of Brazil, is a better adaptation of 1984 than,
I would agree.
as a film.
The thing of the 84 film that I did like, that the other adaptations I watched for today did not, is the interludes in the countryside, because the pattern that's set up is you occasionally see him, in the green hills, and he's outdoors, and it's sort of idyllic. And then the final time not the final time, but like right towards the climax where they cut to that interlude again, he's on the operating table being tortured. And his torturer is with him in that scenario, and he says to him over and over, "I love you, I love you," and that sort of breakdown of his mental barriers, I thought was pretty good.
I agree. I thought that stuff was effective. I thought there was a lot of effective stuff in it. I just didn't quite feel like the movie added up all the way or something, or like it just didn't quite get going. I don't know. It's just so one note. The tone is all exactly the same. It's
and it was of that era of MTV, and when films were trying to emulate kind of the music video aesthetic, I believe, visually.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think that is a part of it. I mean, in the Ridley Scott, Apple commercial or whatever. But
I was going to say, we're going to talk about that, certainly. Yes.
Right, but it's not. It certainly doesn't have the freneticism of
also that
of your average Russell Mulcahy video.
Also, that Twilight Zone, Eye of the Beholder, where with Don Douglas and the Pig People, that has a 84 vibe to it as well. When you see that leader kind of in that totalitarian, everyone needs.
Oh, sure, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
There's definitely a vibe of 84 in that.
Neither of these versions tried to smooth over the bit where Winston and Julie are, come across as incredibly gullible talking to O'Brien, where they're just walking.
Yeah, I know.
They're walking up, spilling their guts. Well, we think you're an enemy of the state, and we want in on
Yeah.
this.
Right, I know. This is basically like this is the core of what's a problem with this, just as a story and storytelling and drama, right? Like, and it's the kind of thing that you could kind of charismatically pass off in a novel, that when you get it up on its feet and try to make it dramatic, it's just like, what are you, idiots? Like in every version of it, they just walk in and go, hey, so anyways, kill me. It's just ridiculous.
We trust you.
And so naive, and that's the problem with like a kind of, heavy-handed satirical novel like this. Like Ian is saying, these characters are not, developed with any depth, and they're there to make a point. And so we lose the elements of it where they act like human beings.
Did you notice in the Studio One version, at least Julia does look over when he starts to tell their secret place?
Oh, I didn't know that.
There's one little bit. He's like, do you two have a place that you meet? You bet. 21 so-and-so lane. He immediately just spills it. And he does flash a little look. And I was like, good. She wasn't willing to go all the way with the trust. And
I do think her character, like from the novel, and also in 1984 80s version of it, is more interesting than a lot of the the earlier portrayals of it, because she's not an ideologue. She doesn't believe in this stuff, but she doesn't care the way that he does, and and the ways that she subverts stuff are not for some kind of idealistic reason. It's to get stuff, have experiences, have sleep with other lower level party members, and get coffee and things like that. And and I think that certainly you can read that as it's misogynistic or something, but I think that she's really a more interesting character in a lot of ways in the book than he is, and just has kind of better conflicts than a guy who's just like, I know everything is not quite right, and I'm gonna and I'm gonna figure out how. Like, it's just so corny, so childish kind of.
She also has a cooler job. She writes porn.
Yes, that's true. No, she just operates a porn writing machine.
Oh, okay.
That's Susanna Hamilton, who I didn't realize, because I don't watch EastEnders, the infamous BBC long-running soap opera drama. She's a regular on EastEnders this year.
She was really good in the movie, though. I think that she gave a good performance. I think everybody was good in it. I
agree.
I'm not even sure. Like, I just somehow the movie doesn't end up quite working for me. But I do think everybody did a great job with what they're doing.
And it was kind of cool that was one of Burton's last things that he did, and he was so good in it.
Yeah, he's great in it. He has, he brings that gravitas, and he doesn't go over the top with it. Well, nobody goes over the top in that movie. Like, they're well under the top in that movie.
Very low key. But again, and Burton always fascinated me, and I got those incredible interviews he did with Cavett and Michael Parkinson, the British Johnny Carson, if you will. Really deep dude, and obviously very troubled man, and a really interesting career. I mean, massive highs and massive lows.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, like, the way that what?
Oh, I was about to laugh about Eddie Albert and Lorne Green. That's what I'm smiling about.
Okay, good.
And then 10 years later, Lorne Green found the Ponderosa, and 15 years later, Eddie Albert found Hooterville. And
I just feel there is something to me. I don't know. Look, I'm not a Lorne Green aficionado exactly, but like there's something about his performance in this, though, where I just feel like he's screaming, I want to be something better and more important than a guy on a fucking TV show about, like, on this Bonanza show forever. Like, he feels like, I'm going to be an important actor in in this thing, and it doesn't feel like that's where his career went.
As I understood it, he was kind of the father figure on set, and kind of number one.
Yeah, but it's also sure, Bonanza. But it's junk. I'm not talking about the thing on his role. I'm talking about the work that he's doing.
Yeah, but I also think that prior to and after Bonanza, he always was doing interesting things. And I mean, his Canadian television background pre-Bonanza was always, and radio for that matter. I mean, that's the thing. I think kind of like William Conrad, he was already a big star before Bonanza came about. And
I think with a lot of these things, you're giving credit for something that I think is probably not. I'm just saying I don't think that he aspired to be on Bonanza forever and be associated with that. I don't know the man. I never had a conversation with Lorne Green, but
maybe his passion was in selling dog food.
That could be Outpost, right?
Was Dan Blocker ever on other things? Was he allowed to be on other things?
Well, he's in Tony Rome.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Gabe, but I know that he plays a strongman in Tony Rome and has some really funny scenes. Go ahead, Gabe.
And the most important thing about Dan Blocker are the cult of the Dan Blocker singers, which is a whole thing that I guess could tie into the to this to some degree, but it's an interesting and disturbing story that I don't know quite fits here because Dan Blocker was not in any of these adaptations of 1984. But there was
about this Big Brother thing, Paul.
A group of singers, like a group of singers from Texas, came out to Los Angeles, and they were big. The guy who was kind of the leader of this group was a huge Dan Blocker fan, but they also had some personal connection to him. He was from their town in Texas or something like that. So when they came out to LA, they had sort of entree, and they met him, and they were like, "Can we call our singing group the Dan Blocker Singers?" And he was like, "Sure, why not?" Right? But it turns out the guy who, the lead guy in the Dan Blocker Singers was a sort of cult leader who had this extremist point of view about a sort of extreme, sort of right-wing sort of idea about, it was like an anti-hippie cult in the 60s where they, and they all lived together in some house up off of Sunset Boulevard, but no one was allowed to leave unless with his permission. Like, people would just go like 2 by 2 to the store, pick up things and come back. No one was it was he was a hardcore sort of cult leader. And I don't know, look it up. It's an interesting story. I'm sure that he was a big 1984 fan.
Now I wish we could interview Dirk Blocker, his son. Who's Brooklyn Nine-Nine and was on Baba Black Sheep when I was a kid, and talk to him about that. Just like, did your dad ever hang out with the cult?
I'm pretty sure that Dan Blocker himself distanced himself from the cult. Although he did get them booked on some like Hollywood Palace style variety shows.
I was going to say, is there any YouTube video of the Dan Blocker Singers?
So if at any point we want to do a podcast about cults,
how did you learn about this?
I don't know, the internet, maybe Cliff Nesteroff.
I guess sounds like a cool thing.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. Look, if you put together shitty television show and low-level show business with a dangerous cult, I'm there. Like, that's all I ever want to hear about.
I'm looking on. I don't see anything on.
Yeah, I don't know how deep we really need to go into this at this point. This wasn't what the show was about.
We really do have that one.
We do have Joey Scarborough, Johnny Cash, and Dan Blocker singing Folsom Prison Blues together from the Johnny Cash TV show. That's as close as we get.
Oh, that's wholesome.
Okay. That's good.
Believe it or not.
Can I pitch a question to the board? So I think it's pretty easy to call out like antecedents, right? Like THX 1138, you could say The Prisoner, so on and so forth. But sure. I'm wondering, can you guys think of prior examples of this whole milieu?
Well,
1984.
Brave New World.
I was going to say Brave New World, obviously. Yeah.
Brave New World,
and
there's also it's something called We WE by Yevgeny Zemaitin, which is a Russian novel that is meant to influence. I just know this from my English. I haven't read it, but
I would include Metropolis and The Shape of Things to Come.
Rossum's Universal Robots. I don't know.
I mean, like, and all. I mean, it's not necessarily. I mean, like, those later H.G. Wells books are also like they're not the same kind of thing because there's a kind of utopian version of this, which then he just spends the rest of his life writing the same boring utopian novel over and over again, basically. But like there are antecedents there are precedents, whatever they're called, in novels. But I don't know if there's, apart from Metropolis, which is really stupid, visually amazing,
Wait.
pretty stupid.
Very basic. Yeah.
What did I just hear? I've had a lot of breaking up. You did not just
yell
say
at me,
Metropolis
William.
is
Like,
really stupid.
This is the point.
Did you?
Look, this is the moment where you yell at me and we create conflict like John likes.
Is that really what I heard? Speaking of Metropolis, it did remind me. No, it's not. It reminded me that the Peter Cushing version, I almost thought would be a great silent film. Like he had the cut of his jib would be so great in a silent film.
So with you.
And the matte paintings on the Ministry of Truth. I just thought, oh wow, this would be a great silent film.
And how big is the Ministry of Truth in that in that Peter Cushing one? Like it is 40 billion feet tall compared to everything else in London. Which is great. It's so stylized and so it's bold. It's good for that.
We didn't mention the Peter Cushing version. They must have had some pre-film sequences, right? Because the exteriors,
all the exteriors. Unfortunately, they're also not that well made either. Even though they had the time and presumably had a little bit more time to do it because it's filmed.
Classic TV, British TV.
But that is the British TV thing of going out with 16 millimeter and shooting exteriors that you can't get in the studio because they basically continued to produce TV with the same kind of setup into the 70s and 80s.
Have we discussed the Monty Python where the guy looks out
turn into video?
Like, I don't know how to tell you, but this entire building is surrounded by film.
Yes, right.
There was a moment in the Studio One version, just from a production standpoint. I'm just hypothesizing here, but when Eddie Albert is in the room and he's waiting for her to show up, and the storekeeper is standing in the doorway, he's acting as if she's almost about to enter, but you hear the footsteps coming up the stairs, and I'm like hypothesizing she was waiting for the sound effect to end before entering the room, but he was like, "You're right here, come on in."
Right.
I don't know if you guys caught that moment.
I didn't see that. That's interesting.
That's great.
Yeah, it is.
My favorite Odd Couple was on where they do the radio play of the Babe Ruth story, and you hear the footsteps sound effect, and Felix is playing the doctor, and he's like, "Hello, immortal babe. I think I'll stop walking now."
So I don't know. My feeling on all of this is 1984, very heavy-handed. Not entirely clear on what it's saying. I feel like I know what it's saying, but I'm not sure that I'm on board.
It was like a fever dream almost. Like Orwell had like tuberculosis and was dying. He died pretty much soon after it was made. It was published, and so it is like coming from a much weirder, deeper place.
Interesting. Sure.
But I do think that like listening to the audiobook, it's like charismatically told. It's effective in the book. It's not, the things that are that feel slimmer character wise don't feel as much like that in the book. But I think that to some extent getting it up on its feet and, in a dramatic thing kind of points out some of the stuff that, that's lacking in it because you need something for the characters to play the drama of stuff. And if it's, if the drama you're playing is just making a political point, then that's not necessarily doing something so much. But I don't know. I don't think it's terrible. I think it's good. I think it's interesting. And I think there's a lot of interesting versions of this, even though I don't know that any of them are great exactly.
No, but again, I appreciate even over the top Lorne Green and truly a very emotive, very humanistic Eddie Albert. I think.
Yeah.
Quite upset. That's Lorne.
We just want to keep looking at that.
There he is. There's Eddie.
You should just put you should just put the Lorne Green one in its own little square here on the
like the
in our
sixth
presentation.
member here.
Yeah, he could be the sixth guy just staring at us all
Lorne
day.
Green.
If only I could do that. That'd be
Lorne.
awesome. Just think 6 years from now, I'll be yelling at Michael Landon and Dan Blocker, and Pernell Rods is going to storm off the show because he's not given enough to do and nobody respects him.
But we'll keep mentioning him every now and then just to keep the idea of him alive.
I was watching, Bonanza tangent, the lead producer and story editor of the show saying that Pernell wanted to leave because he's like, you people are holding me back from my movie career. And we all know how well that movie career went right after he left Bonanza and then finally came crawling back to TV with
Trapper John.
I'll be Trapper John. Fine.
Yeah.
Oops. All right.
Man, there was one weird episode, John. There's one weird episode where Little Joe, his girlfriend dies. And
that's, by the way, that's half of the 500
most episodes,
that
right?
were made.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
continue, please.
Yeah.
Go on.
like, he won't take her out of her house or something. It kind of delves into a slight necrophilia aspect for a while.
Interesting.
After
He just
she's
can't
dead.
like Haas has to go over there and it's like she is dead.
Wow.
Like,
Interesting.
there's so many episodes I could just make one up and you couldn't really check me on it.
I'll be
But,
honest,
it's like, but I swear I saw this.
It's a better show than it's remembered for because a lot of people just like immediately go to the camp and everything. That said, was it Jackie Gale in Tin Men does these incredible monologues about Bonanza, and he's like, "What's with Joe Car? The father." He goes, "He's got 3 sons by 3 different wives." He's like, "What has he got? The dick of death?" Jokes like that. And he goes, "How come they never talk about getting laid? How come you never hear Haas go, Little Joe was just in Carson City and I saw a girl with the best ass I ever saw." He's like, "How come they don't talk like that? I don't think it's an accurate depiction of the Old West." It's like, so watch Tin Men if you missed.
He's setting these maps on fire.
So 1984.
Yes, heard of it.
Uh,
Once again, amazing. By the way, another amazing painting. I love these.
Yeah, the
I love
incredible naivete on that painting. Did we say that that the guy who did the painting was a guy called Dong Kingman, who is a Chinese American painter who actually had a bigger career after this and he was kind of known as a watercolorist, and he's had shows, and he was somebody. So he was the guy who painted that Big Brother thing from the Studio One.
Pouty face.
Yeah, yep. The King Crimson one. Yeah. Which I thought was kind of interesting.
No, that's really.
Whenever I see a painting with multiple eyes, I immediately think of Spellbound.
Oh the Dolly
Hitchcock
sort
film.
of Hitchcock thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Very nice. All right, boyos. I think we've achieved what we wanted.
I think so. Yeah.
We're already down to.
We got our group speak going here. This is great.
Next week, and I imagine it will be a smaller group, but I am really excited about next week. We've discussed it in our pre-production meeting. We're going to do Time for Beanie. Time for Beanie was an amazing puppet show created by Bob Clampett, one of the original Warner Brothers animators, and performed by Dawes Butler and Stan Freberg. And it was a puppet show, but very fun in a satirical way, kind of in the vein of Bullwinkle and other great cartoons that had a satirical bent to them. And such a popular show that Albert Einstein was among its fans back in the 50s. Time for Beanie.
All right. And this is Beanie and Cecil, right? That's
right. It
what
later became an animated series of
Okay.
Beanie and Cecil, but the original puppet show was called Time for Beanie. It was a 15-minute show, and sadly, I've only been able, at least of this recording, I've only been able to find one episode. But maybe like Stud's Place, I'll find more before we talk next week. But
there are other iterations of it later, though, right? So
yes, it became a regular cartoon of Beanie and Cecil.
Right.
And you might have seen snippets of those or even full cartoons, because I remember those being on afternoon cartoon packages
I've never seen any of it. I just know the name. But yeah, I mean, you know, I'm excited. Let's
Back
take a
when
look at
puppet
this.
shows could actually hold America's attention, and this really was a national sensation for live TV.
Yeah.
And also, Bob Clampett was a con man of great proportions, and having met Stan Freberg, who was Cecil, the C6 Sea Serpent, and talking to him briefly about it at a couple conversations, and also reading his books, there's just unbelievable stories about the production of this show and how it managed to make it on the air and be the big hit that it was, despite some very con man moves by Bob.
So that's interesting. Be interesting to look into. I'm always like a puppet show, so you know, I'm looking forward to it.
So that'll be the subject of next week's Kinescope. Until then, everybody, thanks for watching. Guys, thanks for showing up. I hope that we can capture your attention with another science fiction show or whatever allows you guys.
Yeah, because that's all you guys can understand, right? Like you'll only like come around when there's some.
The puppet shows are way above you guys. I understand. That's
yes.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching. Take care. See you next time.
Our report details how advertising through television transforms strangers to your product into acquaintances, and acquaintances into friends, and friends into customers. You could almost say, as a result, that television puts into every living room a selling machine.